part two, the last part of the preview. If you were listening to this today, it's game day, so get excited. And we're going to go through what we expect out of the defense, special teams, and give our game-by-game predictions for this season. So let's start right off the top. 2025 Rutgers defense. Let's talk about the keys to success. We kind of touched on this briefly yesterday, but I want to circle back and see what we think. What is the main key, the single key to success, or the most important key to success that you see for Rutgers having success this season on the defensive side of the ball? Larry, I'll let you start this time. What do you think that key is?
The front seven, which is kind of weird in our system. But look, the D-line, the linebackers have got to be more consistent this season. A lot of talent. Like I said yesterday, they've got to take a step forward. I think Jabome has all the talent in the world. Walker came in highly touted. He's got to know where he is on the field. He's got to take the right angles. And these transfers on the D end, they really got to step up and bring it home sometimes. A lot of pressures last year, not enough sacks. You got to have game-changing plays. You got to have drive killers. And without those drive killers and game-changing plays, it's going to be tough with this schedule to really capitalize with what our offense can do. So complementary football means this defense is going to have to get pressure and stop the run. Secondary is a whole nother story, but that's my key. It starts up front.
You may have heard this before, but I'm the old man of the group, and I needed to put my glasses on, even though I'm blind with my contacts, because I goofed last episode with the stat. Even though they did give up 70% of touchdowns in the red zone last year as a defense, they were not 100%. They missed a couple field goals, opposing teams, so I misread that stat. But 70% allowed touchdowns in the red zone is still way too high. But I think the key, and something that we've seen the best Schiano defenses do, is takeaways. Since he's been back, they have not been able to take the football away. It's like they did it all in that first game against Michigan State in the COVID year, and we haven't seen a game close to that since. And I think as much as, to Larry's point, you need to get that pressure, and that helps generate takeaways. Just for this defense to have playmakers in the back of the defense in the secondary, which we haven't, although we had some really good players back there, other than longer beam here and there weren't a lot of players that just made a play out of nowhere and took the ball away. And I think for this defense to really step up this year, they're going to need to really increase the takeaways they're able to do as a defense.
So I'm going to piggyback off of that, which is this defense has to give up less explosive plays. If they give up less explosive plays and can have better tackling, especially on the perimeter, then I think that frees up the coaches to be more flexible with their defensive calls. If you don't trust that your guys are going to make one-on-one tackles in the back half, then you're going to feel hesitant to, turn everybody loose and make some of those turnovers. So I really think it's still the tackling angles and making plays, sure, if the guy gets a second level, stop him there. If he gets a third level, stop him there. Don't let him get behind you.
I feel like with mine, it's kind of a combination of the previous 3 points. It's just instead of just standing tall, which is obviously a good thing for the defense, they have to force the action and make negative plays happen, which I feel like I've all kind of been talking about. But that was one of the biggest problems from last year's defense when you pair it with how many big plays they gave up. If you're not making plays happen on defense and you're giving up big plays on defense, then that's a really bad combination to have. So I think it's been interesting that even dating back to last season, Schiano, the number one thing with the defense he's talked about for what to improve is taking away the football. The ball is the program, obviously, is the mantra that we've heard year in and year out. And I think they're going to have to do that this year because it seems like it might take a little bit for the defense to gel. So you got to make those big plays and get the defense off the field. It's kind of like the inverse of the old Rutgers adage where, if the offense keeps stalling out, the defense is out there for longer. Now the offense is kind of carrying the load, and it's kind of the thing that I talked about in the last episode. If they're not controlling the tempo and they're just scoring all the time, which obviously scoring points is excellent, that's what you want to do. But if you're getting quick hitters all the time on offense, you're leaving your defense out there. So it's all about controlling the game, I think is the main point, which I kind of talked about on the offensive end. It's just how can this defense control the game, control their side of the ball, whether that's just, obviously playing solid defense, staying tall, but also, flipping the field, making game-changing plays, whether through sacks or turnovers or things like that. We just didn't see a lot of that positively, and we saw too much of it negatively. So How Rutgers controls the game on defense is going to be their biggest key to success, which might seem like a bit of a cop-out because it's very wide-ranging in how you can do that, but I think that's just the biggest key on how to improve from last year.
Yeah, great points by everybody so far. I think getting opposing offenses to kind of have to go off their script a bit and not just be able to set up, second and manageable, third and manageable consistently like we were allowed last year, increasing the havoc rate on defense, which is just the amount of plays that result in a tackle for loss, a sack, a pass breakup, an interception, forced fumble, kind of piggybacking on what a few of you guys said, just being more of a dominant force, I guess, in the sense that like you're kind of setting the tone for what they can do, not the offense setting the tone. How about you, Rich?
I think it's just establishing a pass rush. It's been so long since they've had a legitimate pass rush, and they paid really good money this offseason to get these guys here in Eric O'Neill, Bradley Weaver, and they also brought in 2 interior guys as well. Now, I'm not saying that these guys have to put up insane sack numbers like the Kamoko Toure-esques, but they have to do something to create pressures, and not just create pressures, but also turn some of those into sacks. I mean, Aaron Lewis a couple years ago led, the Big Ten in pressures, I think it was. If not the nation, it was something like that, some crazy stat with pressures, but they weren't turning them into sacks. They need to create havoc in that backfield, and it makes everything so much easier for that back seven. And I think if you could do that this year, sky could be the limit for this team.
Speaking of sky being the limit and paying a lot of money for certain players, there's a lot of candidates to be a potential breakout player on this defense, but let's pick one each. And if we got overlapping, that's fine. Aaron, who do you have as the breakout player on defense this year?
I'm going to stick with my answer. Cam Miller, cornerback, Penn State. I think they need that shutdown corner. I think he could be that guy. They as you mentioned, spent a lot of money on a lot of players to add to this defense. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how all the transfers mesh together, some of them coming from different levels. I think that's, where Rob Smith is going to be key in terms of getting them all in the right spots and to really gel as a defense. But I think Cam Miller is a big part of, if that happens, he will be the guy at corner for the defense.
So breakout player, the more film I watched from late last year, Jordan Walker. I think if we've seen Bradley Weaver play inside on passing downs at his previous stop, all of your guests mentioned to that effect. So I don't think it's necessarily like he won't get snaps. I think if he's good enough, he's going to play, and he's going to just have to be on the field. And I thought that the guy he was late in the season to at least replace some of what Wesley Bailey did was one of the differences in why the team was able to turn it around. So I think the pass rush is right. It's just I think he's the one who I feel like has the potential to really break out.
I'm going to go with one that I'm not sure how well it's going to go early on or how much we'll see of him early on, but I think as the season goes on, he'll get more and more important. I'm going to go with Abram Wright. Before his season-ending injury against Minnesota, it really seemed like he was coming into his own at linebacker. He's a really solid athlete at the position as well. Now, how healthy is he going to be going into game one? Not entirely sure. It seems like there have been some encouraging signs from what we've heard from Shiano. So I think as the season goes along, obviously Jabome is the entrenched starter. Walker's the other entrenched starter. But I think as the season goes along, as he gets healthier, Abram Wright's going to play a big role in this defense. Jabome said it himself, and he's a fun guy to play alongside because he's a great athlete. He can move really well. It's just about getting back to his peak form pre-injury, because before that, it seemed like he was really starting to play well.
That's a good point, because I don't think many of us expected him to be ready for the start of the season, given he got hurt in the Minnesota game, which was in November. So it's really encouraging to hear kind of where he's at in his recovery. I'm going to go with Zaire Angoy, though. He's a guy who started to come on last year, and he's a guy that the team really needs to kind of take a step up. I think this is year 5 in the program for him. So if he can be a guy who steps in and kind of fills 80% of what Keontae Hamilton gave you last year, and even though they're not really similar players, if he can consistently get some push in the interior, I think that will really open things up for the rest of the defensive line. How about you, Rich?
I'm going to go with Jet Elad again. I know I mentioned him, I think last pod, earlier this pod. No, it was last pod. He's just a guy who was all Mountain West last year. He's kind of filling in that role that Flip Dixon had last season and the season before that. But 84 tackles last year, multiple games with double digits, especially against Power 4 level teams in Syracuse, Cal. Had a pretty good game against Kansas last year. He even had nine tackles in the game against a college football playoff participant in Boise State. I really think he could be a very talented kid. And on top of it, he probably is coming in with a chip on his shoulder after the NCAA had that whole appeal court thing and all that other nonsense. But Greg Schiano fought hard for him and fought hard in court for him. Also talked about how much – I talked about it last part about how much they're paying him, which is a lot of money too. So I really think that you don't pay a guy that much money unless he's going to be a pretty solid player. And I think Greg even called him a future NFL pick. So.
Staying in the secondary, give me Kaj Sanders, man. I mean, he came in highly touted kid, Newark kid, hometown, Big North kid for high school. I like the way he plays. I think he can wreak some havoc. Speaking of havoc, just in that safety position, getting his hands on the ball, laying some hits, roaming a little bit. I'm looking for him to be a force, that kind of safety force that we're used to at Rutgers. I think he can break out and kind of be that guy here and there. I'm looking forward to seeing him.
So let's get into some position or some stat by stat projections here. Last year, the over-unders we set last year are similar to this year. So we set it at 99.5 tackles last year for the leading tackler. That went over. Daryl Jabome had 105 tackles on the year. Last year we had 6.5 sacks, being the sack leader over-under. Well under, as we know. Keontae Hamilton and Jordan Walker tied for 4 at the lead there. The interception leader I had at 3.5 last year. That went under as well. Robert Longerbeam and Shaquan Loyal tied for that lead. I set the over-under at 2.5 this year because I think there's a little bit more ambiguity with who might be the leaders in the secondary. Longest field goal made, I kept steady. Last year I had it also at 51.5 yards. That went under. The longest field goal by Jay Patel last year was 49 yards. We did hit the over on the blocks. We had 2 blocked kicks last year. The over-under is set at 1.5. I set the over-under last year for special teams touchdowns and defensive touchdowns at 2.5. That went way under. We had 1 touchdown return. I think that was, I forget who, I think, was it Eric Rodgers?
Eric Rodgers had that pick 6 on the opening drive of the season.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And then the total defense rank, I had it sounds funny now, but 24.5, well over that number. We were the 70th ranked total defense last year. So let's get into this year. Aaron, I'll have you start with who you think is going to lead in each statistical category. Does anyone not think Daryl Jabome is going to lead the team in tackles this year, by the way? Is that a pretty consensus standpoint? Okay, so let's just talk stat by stat, Aaron. Give us who you think is going to lead it and the over or the under.
Yeah, for tackler, I'll go over with Jabome. Sack leader, I'm going to go Jordan Walker under. Close, probably like 5. And then interception leader, I'm going to go over. And why not? I'll go Cam Miller. Am I going through the rest of the list, or am I?
Yeah, we'll do all of them right now.
All right, longest field goal made. Let's go over Jay Patel. Let's hope the coaching staff doesn't jerk him around like last year. I know, Larry, we were eye to eye on that.
Yeah.
The mismanagement there, but credit to him the way he ended the season. So I think it's going to go over. Pump blocks, yeah, I'm going to say over. Let's say 3 blocks for the season. Special teams touchdowns, I'm going to say, with defense touchdowns, let's say over. Breakout player, I kind of said Miller. Defensive MVP, that's a little bit more tough. I'm gonna go with what Richie said. I'm gonna say Jet Elad. I think the impact he could make as a whole, he could be the MVP. And I think if he is the MVP, you see this defense better than maybe at least I expect them to be. And I think I don't know if it's over or under, but worse than 55.5 overall. Maybe not as bad as 70, but I think they're going to give up some yards. I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be about keeping teams out of the end zone and get bending but not breaking and allowing that offense to win games.
Mike, I think you can copy Aaron's over to mine because there's only slight modifications there. I'm going to go under on the tackles for Jabome because I do think other guys are going to just make more tackles. But under with Walker on the sacks, even though I'm high on him. On the interceptions, I'm going to go with Jacoby Henderson because he's had a lot of pass breakups in his career, and I feel like he might be harder for people to know like where he's going to be. And sometimes those quicker guys just get more picks. I'm going to go over on the field goal because if the Illinois kicker could have hit a 58-yarder into 25-mile-an-hour swirling winds, I'm pretty confident Jay Patel can hit a 52-yarder. I'm going to go with over on the kick blocks. Even if they do return more kicks, I think that might actually be better because it might, cause other teams to maybe get a little lazier in their kick protection. Defensive TDs, it's got to be over. I mean, like we saw last year, first play of the season, and you're halfway there. Breakout player, I said Walker. Defensive MVP, I also have Jet Elad for all those reasons. I kind of think he has to be. And then I'm also with Laren on worse on the total defensive rank for the same reasons.
All right, Alex, what do you got?
So same with mine are going to be fairly similar. With the tackles, I'm going to go over Jabome, obviously, with a slight caveat. Getting a lot of tackles could also be indicative of a potentially struggling pass defense. If the coverage isn't great, you're allowing a lot of completions around the middle of the field, so that could be a type of thing. Just because you're getting a lot of tackles doesn't mean you're all flying all over the field as the best linebacker in the country. Not that Jabome is. And I'm not saying he's going to have a bad season, but could also be indicative of the potential defensive struggles. For sacks, this is tough because there's a lot of different guys. I'm gonna go on a limb and I'm gonna go with Bradley Weaver, but I'm gonna take the under. I'm gonna say he gets to around 5 or 6, and I think there's gonna be a few guys in that mix around 5 or 6. I think it's gonna be a similar by committee sack approach, but just amped up a little bit with some more talent. And for interceptions leader, I'll say Jacoby Henderson, and I'll take the under. I think he'll get 2 picks. I think same thing with the sacks. We're gonna see a few guys in that mix. And then for the special teams / defensive stuff, I'm going to go over on all 3, just like Aaron and David did. It's a Greg Schiano-led team. I'm never going to bet against him in terms of blocking kicks. Breakout player, I think I forget who I said, but we already got that. But defensive MVP, I'm going to go Dariel Jabome. I feel like just his impact over the middle of the field, I think he's going to take that step forward as the prime linebacker out there. And for team total defensive rank, same thing again. I'm going to go worse, although I think they'll be around like 60 or so. So if we have if we're looking at an offense ranked around 45 and a defense ranked around 60, I think that's kind of where we're looking for here.
All right. For me, I'm going to go over and Jabome, but I think it is going to be close, similar to last year, maybe tops out at like 110 tackles at most. For sacks, I'm going to go over, and I'm going to go with Eric O'Neill. I think he's the type of guy who I could see him having like 4 sacks after the first 3 weeks, and then he has 3 sacks over the final 9 games. But I think he does get to over 7 or more sacks. Interceptions, I'm going to go under, and I think it's going to be a bunch of guys tied for 2, but if I have to pick one, I'm going to go with Bo Masco. I think he's just the guy who's kind of got breakout written all over him. Field goal made, I'm also going to go over. They had a few opportunities, 50-plus last year. I think they attempted 2 kicks over 50 yards, and he missed both. But I think Patel has I don't know if he has the consistent enough leg, but I think he's kind of like a clutch kicker. He tends to make field goals when they're needed most. I'm also going to go over on the other 2. I think they get more than 2 blocks, and I think they get more than 2 defensive touchdowns. Defensive MVP, I'm going to also go with Jabome. I think they're kind of telegraphing what they think of him with all the media availability they've given, and also just like how he's grown as a player over the second half of last year. And I think they're also going to be worse than the 55th overall defense as well.
Give me over Jabome. I kind of agree with you. I don't think it's going to be that much over, but I think it's going to be very close. I think he hits the triple-digit mark. I don't know how much further than that. I'm going to go over O'Neal because this man is going to use and abuse Shedrick Rhodes in that new Miami offense. They have Shedrick Rhodes couldn't crack the 2 deep here, and Eric
He's
O'Neal
the starting left tackle. Crazy.
it's wild. But he's also destroyed the entire Sun Belt last year. And the MAC Sun Belt, what's the difference, right? Just different geography, basically. That's all it is. So between Miami, Ohio having 11 new starters on offense, obviously their whole line would be part of that 11. I think that he'll use and abuse those 2 teams, and then Norfolk State, he should get at least 1, you would think, right? If not 2. So I do think he'll hit the over on that number. Interceptions are where it gets really interesting. I really liked David's pick of Henderson, so I'm gonna copy him on that one. I think people don't understand how good Henderson could be, and on top of it, you get him for 2 years. I really think that he's going to be a damn good corner and kind of continue that trend of 2-year corners that Greg's getting from the portal, and then somehow turn into NFL like superstars. Like Eric Rodgers just made the team after going undrafted. So between him, Trey Avery, Christian Braswell, the list goes on and on, but. Field goal made. A little bit of a hot take. I'm going over, but it's not going to be Patel. It's going to be someone else. That's all I'm going to say for that. Field goal blocks over on the touchdowns. What's the other one? Breakout player? Yeah, I did that.
This is MVP. Sorry.
Okay.
MVP.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm going to go Jet Elad. I've been hyping him up this podcast, last podcast. I got to go with my guy, right? And then I'm going to agree with all you guys. I think it's going to be worse. I think it's going to be in that 60 range, 65-ish range. I don't think it'll be as bad as last year. It'll be slightly better, but it's still not going to be in the top 50 range, though.
Jabome over. Sack leader, I'm going to go Weaver, and I'm going to go under. I think he can probably – I don't know how he's going to rise to this level and what he's going to do, but in the early games – he should have some success, and I want to root for him to see if he can do it. He won't get over 6.5, but I think with enough run, maybe he'll be the leader. Interceptions, I'm going to go Bo Mascow as well. Longest field goal, I'm going over. If there's somebody else, this mystery person, I'm looking forward to seeing that. And if it's Patel, I think he can hit it. He's going to miss a few. He'll make a few if they set him up right. So I'm going to go over. Punt blocks and kick blocks over. Special team defense touchdowns over. I just talked about this. That is always going to be part of Rutgers' identity. Block kicks, special teams plays, defensive touchdowns. If we're not getting that, we're not getting the wins we want. I think those are game changers. Rutgers needs them. Breakout player, I said Koch Sanders. Defensive MVP, I'm going Jabome. I'm going to go better than 55.5, not because I have any academic X's and O's reason for it, just because if we come back next year and they are better, I want to be the one who wins that category. And I think, look, there's a chance some of these guys emerge, maybe a little better than we think, and maybe these linebackers become what we thought they could be, especially when they came into the program. I don't think it's likely, but you never know, and it would be a pleasant surprise. So.
All right, we have set the table. We finally got to the culmination here. We're going to talk game by game, where we think the wins are going to come from the schedule, where we think the losses are going to come from the schedule. And we haven't compared notes, so nobody here knows what anyone else is going to say with regards to what they're thinking. And let's keep it spontaneous that way. I don't want anyone influencing what we think in terms of the game-by-game schedule predictions. First 3 games of the season, though. I think it's going to be pretty unanimous, 3-0. Does anyone not have Rutgers starting the season 3-0? If so, feel free to speak your piece about why you think they might lose one of those games. So consensus, 3-0 start.
If anyone wants to hear why, they should listen to our game previews, Mike.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and just give the 3-0 across the board. Schiano continues his streak with the out-of-conference wins. I still can't believe he hasn't lost an out-of-conference scheduled game since he's been back. That just kind of just shows that a lot of teams, especially in lower levels or the ACC, aren't really playing with the same kind of intensity, I guess, as you do in the Big Ten.
Way to jinx it, Mike.
Yeah.
Here we go. 0-3 incoming. You can find me hiding below my desk trying to avoid the haters. All right, so let's go to the first test of the season where I think we'll see some differing opinions. I'm going to just start with me here because that's the order I have it in. We'll kind of stagger it as we go. I know we're going to change it up a bit, so apologies. I have them losing this game, and here's why. Rutgers has struggled with Iowa since they've joined the Big Ten. They have a significant upgrade at quarterback this year. I think it's the best quarterback they've probably had since like Ricky Stanzi, which, you know, he wasn't the best either, but the point is they've had some really awful quarterback play, and I think Mark Gronowski is significantly better than what they've had in the past. I also think both sides of the line, Iowa is significantly better than Rutgers, and we've talked about how, you know, the line play is typically how you win these games. And Iowa, an interesting quirk about the Iowa game is that Iowa will have played UMass the week before they play Rutgers, and I don't know who the bigger advantage is there. If it's Rutgers for getting the deep, dossier of information from Harris-Simiak, or if it's Iowa because they essentially see the diet version of Rutgers the week before that they play us. Richie, what do you think happens with the Iowa game? Who do you got winning that one?
I mean, Joe Harris-Simiak is no Rob Smith. 3 times Rob Smith, sorry. I got Rutgers pulling this one out. I think that Gronowski is a solid quarterback. I think that there's a little bit too much hype on social media about a forward pass going on in Iowa. And it's just like, that thing got like 14 million views. Like, have you never seen an out route before? Like, geez, like, and then all of a sudden, and that was, mind you, that was posted by either Big Ten Network or from the Iowa Hawkeyes football account. Then all of a sudden, like a week goes by and you see like scrimmage highlights and the guy fumbled 3 snaps, threw a pick 6, or it would have been a pick 6. And it's just like, okay, maybe he's not that good. Like, his stats are good. He was good at South Dakota State, but it is still a big jump up to the Big Ten level. I think Rutgers this year, and I think you actually might have said this on our boards, Mike, they're not going to have to out Iowa this year. They're going to change it up this year, and they're going to have a better offense this season. So I really think between the atmosphere, and maybe it's just me looking into the past and saying, like, all right, they just did the same thing against Washington last year, and I predicted a win, and it worked out. So I'm just going to stick with my gut here and say that they're going to pull this one out and start out 4-0.
Actually, that was me that said that.
Okay, Alex said it. Sorry, I knew one of you guys said it on the boards.
But yeah, that's what I was going to mention from our season predictions a couple days ago. I'm gonna predict that Rutgers wins this game for the reason that Richie said. It feels like they finally have the offensive firepower to, like Richie said, they don't have to out Iowa for lack of a better term, where it seems like just out of pure necessity, they've had to try to play Iowa at their own game, try to win in the trenches, make plays on defense, and just do enough with the run game on offense to grind them down. But Iowa's always been more physical than them. They've always had that advantage in the trenches. But I think the offense and the way it's been able to open up, we think this season with the passing game, I think they're going to do just enough. This game's going to be more high scoring, I think, than people think. I don't think it's going to be like a 31-30 shootout type game. But I think I want to say Iowa's offense coordinator in his second year, Tim Beck, I think I want to say his name is. But either way, they were actually not bad on offense last year. So I'm going to say it's going to be a higher scoring game. I think the trenches are still going to be very important, but Rutgers, I think, has the offensive firepower to overcome some of the disadvantages they may have in the lines, and even some of the matchups with the defensive backs that Iowa always seems to have versus the wide receivers. I think they overcome that, and I think they win a close game with shades of last year against Washington.
Tim Lester. Tim Beck's at Coastal.
Tim Lester.
That's what I thought, yeah.
My heart says Rutgers, my head says Iowa. I just got to see it to believe it. I'm a little higher on Gronowski as a QB in the Iowa uniform, because if it's a dogfight, he can overpower people running. If he has to stand in the pocket and throw, I think he can do that. And then really the thing that I've always harp on is Iowa will have played Iowa State earlier in the year. So not only do they get Diet Rutgers the week before, they get the Iowa State team that just beat Kansas State earlier in the year. So I think they're going to learn a lot more about their team over the first 3 games. And so, again, my heart says Rutgers, but I'm going to pick a loss on that game, unfortunately.
Who do you think that benefits more, Iowa or Rutgers, with that kind of weird quirk about them playing UMass the week before?
I think it benefits. I think it benefits Iowa more, especially because in tandem with the Iowa State, because they're going to figure out what happened against Iowa State, and then they're basically going to put their game plan in for Rutgers a week early.
Mm.
I guess in theory, Rutgers could treat Norfolk State like Iowa, but I don't know if that's going to work out in the same way.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Also, are we sure Harris Samir's going to share notes with Rutgers after that game? I don't know about that, but we'll see. But I think controlling the line of scrimmage is key in this game, and I think unfortunately, I don't know if the Rutgers defensive line is going to be able to. To other people's points, I don't think Iowa's going to put up 30 plus, but I think they might be able to control this game in terms of time of possession, moving the ball, and I think that's ultimately going to be the difference in a close loss.
I take Rutgers to win this game. I think we have a repeat of last season. The home crowd's going to be energized. Yes, we've struggled against teams like this, especially controlling the trenches. Yes, they now have this forward pass thing figured out, which could present some problems. But at the end of the day, we're going to have offensive firepower and the momentum of the crowd that I think can, in what I think can be a close game, will be decisive. And I like Rutgers to pull it off, get that monkey off our back in terms of Iowa. We've had close games before, especially at home. And if a guy doesn't go down years ago against Iowa, we probably win that game. We have those playmakers now, enough of them that even if somebody goes down, knock on wood, we can still pull it out. Let's beat them for once at home and start 4-0.
So the fifth game in 5 weeks here at Minnesota. Minnesota will be coming off of a bye into this game, and they'll also be wanting revenge for how last year played out. Richie, start with you. How do you think the Rutgers-Minnesota game goes?
I think that PJ Flex said it best on Adam Breitman's podcast, and he is the little brother here. And I think Greg Schiano's the big brother, and he's going to beat up on the little brother. I shouldn't say beat up, but they are replacing the quarterback. Obviously, Darius Taylor's pretty damn good, and it's not just him back there. They have a really solid transfer back, and A.J. Turner behind him, too. I just think Rutgers is going to pull this one off. I'm really confident in this year's team. I think this offense is going to give people a little bit of a shock early season, and they're going to be like, holy shit, who's that team? And then you're looking, and you're like, oh, my God, is that a block R? What the hell? Like, that's the team playing offense for once? Wow, all right. But, yeah, no, I do think Rutgers has a good shot here. I don't know how good Drake Lindsey is really going to be. I think a road game is going to be tough. And like you just said, Minnesota's coming off a bye, and that makes it a little bit tougher. But I have a feeling we might be talking about 5-0 Rutgers.
Yeah, I'm going to stay bold, and I think I'm going to pick Rutgers to win this game as well. Wow. I just felt like they showed enough last year against this team. They're replacing Corey Heatherman, who left to go to Miami. Maybe the defense takes a little bit of time to reload. Granted, Coy Parrish might be one of the best players in the entire country, maybe a Jabril Peppers light type player with his return game and even some of the offense that he can provide. But I think it's going to be another one of those games where there's a lot on the line for both teams because they keep swapping with each other from different regards. I think Callie McManus is going to be pumped up to play at Minnesota for the first time in a Rutgers uniform. I just like what I saw from Rutgers last year facing off against Minnesota, especially with their season on the brink. I mean, that was the game that kind of turned things around. I really like what I saw from that team. It's going to be tough on the road. Definitely will not be easy. I'm thinking this is a little bit more of a typical Big Ten rock fight type game even than the Iowa game. I think we'll see a little bit of a switch there with Minnesota being the lower scoring game, but I think Rutgers makes a couple plays late. Again, Drake Lindsey, still young, not really sure what to expect from him. Maybe he makes a mistake here and there late. But yeah, 5-0 Rutgers. I can't believe I'm saying this right now. I think Rutgers starts 5-0.
All right, I guess I'm gonna have to be the one who pumps the brakes again. I appreciate everything everyone said. I'm not sold on their QB. But I just think they're going to be juiced for this game against Rutgers. They do not like Ethan in that fan base. They hate him. Their fans are going to be going nuts, delirious, assuming that they start out against 3 scrub opponents and win. And then from there, And I don't love their quarterback. Usually that's the reason that they're not playing anybody of consequence, whereas Rutgers will have just played Iowa and have a little bit of an extra day to prepare. It's just the toughest game for me to pick all year, but I'll go with the loss.
Yeah, I was back and forth on this one in my head. I think that ultimately, I think kind of out of Shiano's playbook, having extra time to prepare and knowing the staff so well, Minnesota has the edge in this one. I also think Rutgers coming off a very physical game against Iowa. If you remember, 2 years ago at Iowa, Rutgers looked shell-shocked the next week. They were not the same physically after that game, so I have some concerns there as well. I think they will be competitive, but I think they fall just short on the road. And I think David's point about the fan base, being pretty jacked up for last year and also Ethan, it isn't going to help either. So I think they're going to lose as well.
As much as I want to pick Rutgers to win this, especially because you have a young quarterback, a relatively highly touted young quarterback, but a young quarterback nonetheless, you got to factor in playing on the road against a crowd that really wants to take it to Ethan. Ethan got revenge last year. They want revenge this year. PJ Fleck doesn't want to be the daddy and the son forever. He's at home. And, I just think there's a lot of credence in what Aaron said regarding the physicality of an Iowa team, the emotion it's going to take to get through that game, which I do think we win. I think we have a little bit of a letdown, play hard, but just can't pull it off on the road against Minnesota. I think a much-needed bye comes after that, given the physicality of those two games.
Yeah, I'm also going to be a bit of a downer here. I think for a lot of the reasons that have already been discussed, I think this is kind of like a schedule loss in a lot of ways for Rutgers. Playing it, everything's kind of stacked against them going into this game. 5 games in 5 weeks, Minnesota wanting revenge, coming off bye, blah, blah, blah. But I do think this is a game they can win. I'm not saying this is a 100% like lock loss like some of the other games that might be on the schedule. But yeah, I think they slip up for a second loss in 2 weeks before the bye. Alec coming off the bye, get Washington in Seattle, road night game out in the Pacific Northwest. How do you think that game goes for Rutgers?
Yeah, I think this is where the undefeated train stops. I think they fall on the road to Washington. For one, you're playing, granted, you're coming off a bye, but you're going cross country. Now, last year kind of showed that kind of goes both ways as to how that goes. But Washington is still a very talented team. They lose Stephen Belichick at defensive coordinator, but they get Ryan Walters, who definitely did not show much as a head coach, but we saw what he did with Illinois. He was able to really build that defense up. There's still plenty of talent on this team. Damon Williams might be a dark horse for a potential All Big Ten selection. I mean, he's been widely hyped up. I think we kind of have to see it first with him, but the talent is completely there. Plus, he's a huge running threat, which, as we have all kind of discussed at certain points, Rutgers kind of struggles with at times. They still got Jonah Boston. They still got Denzel Boston. Or Jonah Coleman, who played really well last year. They still got Denzel Boston. I think there's just going to be too much playmaking, even after coming off the bye, which we know Rutgers is usually playing pretty well coming off a bye week. I think the combination of factors, I think this is where the train kind of comes to a stop with the undefeated season. There's still too much talent on this team. I don't want to say they upgraded at defensive coordinator, but they certainly didn't downgrade, I would say. So I think this is where it comes to an end.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Alec for pretty much all those reasons. Couldn't stop Williams last year, and he played a little. Couldn't stop Coleman at all. Couldn't stop Boston at all. And that's a really, really, really tough place to play. So, again, if Rutgers is better than we all think, they could win. But it's hard for me to, just like with the first 3 games, it's hard to predict that they're going to lose. This is hard for me until I have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, I'm going loss too. I also think, the 11 p.m. Eastern time kickoff, you saw last year against USC kind of coming out kind of slow. They did get a little competitive in that game. I think also, to David's point, just the inability to stop the offense down the stretch in that game last year. I mean, Rutgers was, fortunate to win that game. They made more plays, but, they got outgained. Washington's going to be pretty amped up. I think even though Rutgers has that bye and extra time to prepare, it's still going to be a loss on the road.
Going to be a loss. We were near losing so many times last year, and we deserved the win for a number of factors, and I was overjoyed with the win. And you got to win games like that sometimes, but going on the road, it's kind of unfortunate that we have that bye that comes at a great time, and then we've got to go on the road all the way to the West Coast with a team that's just going to be hard to keep up with, and is still going to have a defense that's formidable. Kind of going off what Alex said. So I think that's a loss for the Knights.
I'm going to go against the green here. I think
the
Rutgers...
horn, I'm used to the horn, you see.
Larry just got
I
a
live
first
with
down.
the horn.
Yeah.
The horn is fine with me. Anyway.
Is Larry lining up in the trenches for third down?
Oh, my goodness. I'm going to go against the grain. I think Rutgers finds a way to win this game. Greg Schiano is very good with extra time to prepare for teams. I think he's shown that he's got the ability to kind of right the ship midway through the season. I think this is a game that it's certainly going to be high scoring. I don't really have a whole lot of quantitative reasoning why I think Rutgers wins this game, other than I don't think that they're going to lose 4 games in a row, because I don't know how many people have Rutgers beating Oregon. I just don't really see that in the cards this year. I think they find a way to win at Oregon, or at Washington, in a game that really is a 60-40 proposition. I know we talked about that, a few times. I know you guys talked about that on the Scarlet Faithful season preview, but I don't see Washington as a head and shoulders better team than Rutgers, and I think this is kind of a few bounces of the ball one way or the other.
I kind of agree with you, because anytime you give Greg Schiano extra time to prep for a team, he does a really good job of doing so. That being said, I can't have Rutgers winning this game. I just don't see it. I think Jonah Coleman's probably their best player. He's a stud. The dual threat quarterback and Williams they have. They also added a top 12 transfer portal class. They got a lot of money, and they spent a lot of money to build this roster. I know Ryan Walters, like Alex said, is a damn good DC, and he's finally getting back to his roots of what he was doing before. And then on top of it, they have a 20-game winning streak at home. Now, is that winning streak going to be there when Rutgers comes to town? Probably not, because Ohio State's coming to town the 2 weeks before. So I do still think that, like Dave said, that place is just a very, very tough place to play at. And going cross-country, it hasn't really benefited Big Ten programs, as you could tell by last year.
So I want to do something a little different for Oregon, and we're going to group Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State together, because I don't raise your hand if you guys have us beating any of those 3 teams in your prediction. So that's a no. So I think that's the fair, reasonable point to take. Let's go around the room here, starting with you, David. If Rutgers was to beat one of those 3 teams this season, between Oregon for homecoming, at Ohio State, or Penn State for the final game of the year on senior night, if Rutgers was to beat one of those, if I just told you I just got back in my time machine, Rutgers won one of those 3 games, guess which one it was? What would your guess be and why?
Ohio State. And I do think they might be the best of the 3 teams. However, we're going to start seeing a good NFL style, good old fashioned, I've got my playoff spot locked up, I'm going to rest my players. And it's going to be a rest up for, I guess, Michigan / the playoff. Whereas if Penn State is in a similar position, there's no way in hell that James Franklin is going to not do the same thing. So, I think Rutgers is the offense to make a play, but I feel like Ohio State might be a little bit conservative with their players. And what we have seen them when they have lost games, it's when their heart wasn't in those games. And that is when they've lost in recent years. And I feel like if Rutgers was to pull one of them, that would be why.
Yeah, I would similar logic to what David's saying, but I would go Penn State as the most likely. Also, because I think it could be the flip side of that too. And I do think Penn State very well could win the Big Ten, but I think if they have another disappointing, lose 2 or 3 close games and they're out of the playoffs, I think on the flip side that could also work against them. And some of their players just not be as engaged in this game. And obviously senior day, this is going to be a Super Bowl for Rutgers. Who knows? They might be fighting for bowl eligibility or hopefully fighting for a better bowl. And it would mean a lot more to Rutgers than it would Penn State. So I think if there is a chance for them to beat one of these three teams, it's Penn State. And I just want to end by saying I hope Kelly Zinn, in one of her first internal audits, finds out who decided that Oregon should have been the homecoming game, because it was a terrible decision. And I don't know why we couldn't have waited till November 8th or whatever to have Maryland as the homecoming. Have it a little late, but Oregon as your homecoming opponent is about as rough as it gets when you are a bowl contender. So, but overall, those are my thoughts.
I'm going to speak my piece a little bit based on what Aaron just said and then give you my answer. I totally agree with the homecoming thing. Maryland, too. I have so many friends and colleagues that are Maryland graduates and then married to Rutgers fans. And we always have a blast at the Maryland games. To have it be homecoming would have been awesome. I know it would have been a little late. It's a more appropriate game. We're not beating Oregon. I don't think that speed and things are just too tough for us. I waver between Ohio State and Penn State because I like David's theory that Ohio State is going to be looking ahead to their big game of the season, and it might catch them slipping. However, being on the road, Ohio State being at home, I just think it's more – if I had to pick, I'm obviously predicting losses in both, but I just like the idea, the way my predictions are going to go, Rutgers is not going to be hunting for bowl eligibility. They're going to have it, but they're going to have a little bit of swagger. They're going to be feeling good. And Penn State's coming into our house. Rutgers is probably going to be feeling the best it's felt in many years in some ways going up against Penn State. And maybe Penn State, like some of you said, is hurting a little bit because they didn't get into the playoffs. Maybe they already punched their ticket. Either way, the home crowd's going to be crazy. We'll see what time the kickoff is. If I had to pick one out of the three, I think I'm picking Penn State.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same thought process. I know I've kicked it around to the TKR guys where it's like, what if this game means nothing? Does that, do they play their starters? Do they risk, maybe Drew Aller rolled his ankle 2 weeks beforehand and they want to rest him up for the Big Ten championship because those championship games still will mean something because you could get a bye out of that first round. And if you look at how the schedules are constructed, when we play Ohio State, that'll be their fourth game in 4 weeks with Michigan the following week, like you guys said. So we'll have a pretty sizable rest advantage against Ohio State. And Penn State will be their fifth game in 5 weeks, and we'll be 1 week removed from our bye. And I think given how Penn State's schedule is structured, they better be kissing the Big Ten's feet after this because they have 3 games against Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova. Then they have a bye. Then they play Oregon at home. So they get a bye before the Oregon game, and Oregon is going to be on a rest disadvantage. And then before the Ohio State game, they also have another bye leading into that one. So it's just kind of crazy how well it sets up. So Penn State, if things go as they are expecting it to, I think Penn State is the most likely because in my eyes, they could very well be 10-1 in that game and have a Big Ten title game appearance locked up. So they literally will have nothing to play for at all. So I think it's most likely, if there was one game, that it would be the Penn State game. How about you, Rich?
I know it's a Rutgers pod, but that team is probably the best team on paper, in my opinion. I'm not touching that one. Penn State is going to be that good this year. I'm sorry to say it, but I want to pick Ohio State, but I'm going to go Oregon. There's a lot of question marks there. They're replacing Evan Stewart as their top guy. They're replacing their quarterback. We don't really know what Dante Moore is. They're replacing their top 3 defensive linemen who all went, top 90, 95 in the NFL draft. There's a lot of things that could go wrong really quickly if they also catch the injury bug. So I'm really it's hard to pick one because these are 3 powerhouse Big Ten teams, but I really think between homecoming, between a night game at SHI, the atmosphere there, I'm just going to go with Oregon because I feel like there's just too many question marks about that team still.
I thought I was going to be the one who was different by picking Oregon for a lot of the reasons that you just outlined. I mean, both Ohio State and Oregon are starting young redshirt freshman quarterbacks, but I have more confidence if Julian Sayin is just okay. I have more confidence that Ohio State is just still going to be the same old Ohio State. Now, Oregon could be a lot of the same things because the speed that they have and the infrastructure with their 2 coordinators who are both very good and 2 of the best in the country at their respective spots. But in his true freshman year at UCLA, I didn't really see a ton from Dante Moore. Granted, again, true freshman, could have grown a lot in a really strong offensive system, but I feel like there's more variance for Oregon in terms of how they actually look this year and how good of a team they are. So I think in terms of that, now I understand the points with, maybe Ohio State and Penn State are kind of taking a little bit off their foot off the gas as they get ready for the playoff, but I feel like we haven't really seen that as much just yet. So while it could happen, I'm kind of doing my thinking based off of we're still going to see the same usual Penn State and Ohio State at their full selves. So I'm going to say that Oregon has probably the most variance in terms of how their floor and their ceiling. And I'll go with Oregon because the question marks that Richie already outlined.
So moving forward on the schedule, does anyone have Rutgers losing at Purdue? And I think it's a game that Rutgers should win, and it's certainly not going to be the same walk in the park a Ryan Walters led Purdue team might have been like last year. I think Barry Odom is a good coach, but they did turn over something crazy like 70 new scholarship players going to be on the roster this year. Does anyone have Rutgers losing to Purdue?
I don't have them losing, but I think this could be the Purdue-Illinois game that we saw last year where it just randomly becomes a wildly close game, and it's going to raise a few heart rates in Piscataway.
Yeah, it's a game that we certainly can't overlook, but I think Rutgers should win that game. Let's go to Illinois then, who's currently ranked 12th, I believe, in the AP poll. Aaron, how do you see that game going down in Champaign?
Yeah, so I've been back and forth on this one. I've looked at Illinois' schedule. I mean, they have a chance to start 5-0. They are at Indiana, who I'm way down on. I pissed off a lot of Indiana fans today with my putting them 13th in my power rankings preseason on an Ants Right tweet. So I got a lot of familiar friends from the Hoosier fan base in my mentions. But I think that Illinois is a good team. I don't think they're a great team. And I think, maybe some karma from last year. Maybe Belima tries to ice Patel or the mystery kicker that Richie's talking about, and the roles reverse, and Rutgers wins in a miracle. I was back and forth on it, but I'm going to be optimistic on this one and say, Shiano gets the best of them after last year, and they pull off the upset. And maybe this is actually the first ranked win that we've been looking for. Everyone's talking about the big three, but everyone's kind of overlooking this opportunity. They could be on a 2-game losing streak going into this game. Ohio State, they also play at Washington the Saturday before, so they're coming back on regular rest after a West Coast trip. So I do think they're vulnerable in this game, and I'm going with Rutgers for the upset.
I agree with Aaron. I think we're coming off a win, I think, against Purdue. We're feeling ourselves again. We got to get back on track. Illinois has a little bit of a tough stretch before that. Solid team, good team, but it's just like I think Washington wants revenge in Minnesota. I think we want revenge on them in their house. We beat them before. It's a back and forth type of series with them. We take the victory.
Oh, man, I hate to be another person who thinks, that Rutgers is going to win at a ranked opponent. And for me, it'll be the third ranked win in a row. But I got Rutgers winning this game. I think that this is similar to the Minnesota game earlier in the season. I have them losing. This is a game that bad taste in your mouth type thing. I think Illinois is I wouldn't say pretty overrated. I think Illinois is overrated. They're not a bad team, but they are certainly not a top 12 team in the country, and I think their ranking at the end of the season will reflect that. I think Rutgers is a very evenly matched team with Illinois, and I think Rutgers will be more desperate for a win than Illinois in this game. How about you, Rich?
You're going to have to be patient with me as my dog is constantly drinking water in the background right now. But very distracting. So I don't know how you do it with the train horn, Larry. I give you credit. But, I'm going with a loss here. I can't see Rutgers taking down Illinois in their own house this late in the season. Guys are going to be banged up, bruised. They're returning 17 of 22 starters. It is a damn good Illinois team. I don't think they're as good as they should be, or they're as good as they're ranked currently. But I do think they're probably still a top 25 team by the end of this season. They are a solid team. Bielema's a solid coach. Hell, he was almost Rutgers coach at one point. I just can't see Rutgers pulling this one off. There's just too much going against them.
Richie, I promise I have my own thoughts, and I'm not just copying you. But I
Yeah,
am also
I'm
going to say
sure.
that Rutgers
Weird.
loses this game.
Weird.
Yeah, it's tough because, like Aaron said, there's a lot of, and like a lot of you guys have already said, there's definitely some bad blood from the way last year's game went down and all that. But I again, like Richie said again, I think this Illinois team is good, but I mean maybe not 12th in the country good. And I think just being on the road, it's going to be the fourth game in 4 weeks. Two of those games are really tough. Purdue might be a little bit easier, but if we're going off the track that I'm going off of where that's a close game, I think they might be a little bit worn down going into that game. I think this is going to be a loss. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be kind of comparable to last year, but I thought Illinois did some things on defense that were, kind of preventable. I think they made some errors on defense that they could fix up. Aaron Henry's still a young coordinator, still growing. This defense could be better. They lose Pat Bryant, but they still have Luke Altmaier. Gabe Jacobs is still there. In the linebacker room, he's still very good as well. So I'm going to say this is a loss for Rutgers, but I think a close one. Richie, I promise I have my own thoughts, but this is just how it's going so far.
This is the Shiano special win of the year. I'm going to go with because, like everybody said, kind of the inverse Minnesota. Rutgers is the one who's going to be caring more about this game. Illinois is coming back from that. They're in an odd situation where they have a bye. They play Washington, then they play Rutgers, and they play another bye. So it's kind of like a weird space. The other thing, this is another X factor. It's the day after Halloween. And as someone who played college football, I can tell you that the home team is always going to be hungover on a Halloween post game. No matter who your coach is, no matter what, some guys are going to sneak out. I'm just telling you for sure. And so, whereas a road team, I think you might be able to keep your guys a little bit more focused, especially for a game like this. Rutgers is a young team, so I think they might be very streaky and gaining confidence. The other thing, I'll actually do the opposite on the Illinois returning starters thing. I think they might have a little bit of Rutgers syndrome from last year where, they have so many returning starters that these guys are going to play, and then some of them are going to get hurt, and then there's not as much of guys coming through the ranks. So, again, I mean, this is kind of – I see all the reasons why Illinois should win at home. I like Altmaier, but again, like maybe he's banged up, and we don't know who's on the dock. And Bielema Shiano is just a matchup where that's just going to be a coin flip every time. So I think the coin might come up heads for Rutgers this year.
And then the final game we have to predict here is the Maryland game. Rutgers, was finally able to take down Maryland last year after Talia Tagovailoa just took us behind a woodshed for 3 years, and that offense just was, flying all over the field. They don't have Billy Edwards anymore. He is now at Wisconsin. I think they're right now likely going to start a true freshman quarterback, so you'd ideally like to play a guy like him earlier in the season, not after he's played, his 9th or 10th game. But Larry, how do you see this Maryland game shaking out?
Tables have turned with Maryland. I think this is going to be maybe the story for a while. We back and forth for a couple seasons, and then we took some L's for a while, and now I think we're going to take some W's. Tagovailoa is gone, and we were able to handle business last year based on what you just said, Mike, about some of their key losses too. I think we take care of business, and we have a very respectable season beating Maryland.
So this is a game that I think Maryland will be improved from last year. Loxley's in the hot seat, but this is 5 games in 5 weeks for Rutgers. I don't know where they're going to be at in this part of the season, but it's just really tough to I think Maryland's playing at a rest advantage in this game. I think Rutgers should win this game, but I think this is just another toss-up. For the sake of this, I hate to do this, but I'm going to say they win, but it would not surprise me whatsoever if they did lose this game, because I just there's going to be weird with what WTF games that happen every year, and I think this could be the one this season where if they win a game like Illinois, the following week there's a big emotional letdown with Maryland.
Put it like this: they're not on rest advantage. They're going to Indiana, or Indiana's coming to town the week before. So,
yeah, their bye is the week before the Indiana game.
Yeah. and then they
Okay,
play
so-
Indiana at home, and then Rutgers on the road. This is a W. This is Mike Loxley's swan song. He's gone. See you later. I mean, he'll get a win against Florida Atlantic because they have a new coach. Thomas Hammock might pull off the unthinkable 2 years in a row and take down another Power 4 school in week 2, and taking Northern Illinois to Maryland. I just think that by this point they might have legitimately 3 wins on the year, and I think that if you have 3 wins this late in the season, you got to just shit can him. Like, he's not that good of a coach. He's proven he's not that good of a coach. He has the money and NIL behind him, and that's the big reason how he got Malik Washington, who I think has a ton of potential. But I don't see this one happening. I think this is going to be Rutgers' 7th win of the season, and it's going to not only lock him into a bowl, but ideally a better bowl that's not in the Bronx.
You'll never guess where I'm going with this prediction.
I could guess.
I think Rutgers is going to win this game. Kind of the inverse to what David was talking about with the Illinois game. I think they're going to lose an emotional, hard-fought game at Illinois, and I think this is the kind of, you lose three of 4 games in October. I think this is the get-off-the-mat type game against a team in Maryland that, like Richie said, could potentially be spiraling. And, I mean, just look at what they lost. They lose basically 3 of their top playmakers on offense, Caden Prather, Ty Felton, and Roman Hemby at the running back. Also, you lose Billy Edwards Jr., who I really wasn't that high on, but having him back would have at least given some experience. But the thing is, you're starting a true freshman now. How far along is he going to be in his true freshman season? We'll have to wait and see. But I just don't think there's enough talent on this Maryland team. They're also replacing 3 starters on the offensive line. They went to some of the FCS ranks and some of the lower level ranks to replace those guys, and they're expected to start right away. So I just don't see it with this Maryland team. I think Rutgers wins. But again, like Mike said, this could be the typical WTF game where it could be closer than it should be. But I think Rutgers does eventually get the win. I just think they have the talent advantage here.
Yeah, this is going to be my confidence that this program is going in the right direction win. That Maryland wins when they have a huge talent advantage on their opponent, and I don't think that gap is where it has been. So even though Rutgers only beat them 14, 17, 20, and 24, I think this is the first time they have a 2-game win streak against the Terps since joining the conference.
Yeah, I think the key traits that Maryland had in that 3-game winning streak was they had the better quarterback, they had more talent, they had more speed. Shiano's obviously the better coach than Loxley, but he had all of that against him in those matchups. I think that's in Rutgers' favor this time. They come back, they're home after a big win with a chance to clinch bowl eligibility, knowing what's ahead of you with Ohio State and Penn State. I think the maturity of this program, they get it done, and they clinch another bowl game.
That's the thing that I wish I had said when I was speaking about this game, is that if they're sitting at 5 wins going into the Maryland game, this will almost be like the total back against the wall. Like if the coaching staff was given truth serum, they would say, yeah, we need to win this game to make a bowl. And I think it might be like a kitchen sink style game. So if my prediction was sitting at 5 wins with this, I think my analysis might have been a little different, but this might be a game that they know that they can't lose as well. So for the season predictions, I've got Rutgers going 7-5. Richie's got Rutgers going 7-5. Alec, you've got them going 7-5. Larry, 7-5. David and Aaron, you've got them going 6-6. Any closing thoughts on this Rutgers season? Any leftovers that we didn't really get a chance to discuss? I don't have anything. So Richie, I'm just going to start with you. Any final thoughts on the season outlook for Rutgers on any side of the ball? Anything you want to talk about?
I think this is going to be such a good year for the offense. I talked about it in our first part of the pod. I really think that this wide receiver unit is going to be pretty explosive, add in a solid run game. I shouldn't even say solid run game because I really don't think they're going to miss a beat. And that's after losing the number 2 rusher in program history in Kyle Monungai. So I just think this offense, the sky's the limit there. They could really do some really fun things this year. And you see it with Greg Schiano talking about the team in the final press conference earlier this week. You heard it in our interviews. Well, I guess you didn't hear it in our interviews, but Ethan Kaliakmanis was pretty giddy in his last interview before the game too, when asking about the offense. And they just can't stop hyping each other up. And then on top of it all, the offensive line being raved about by BTN, which is like almost never happened since they started doing the tailgate tour. I think you combine it all, and this offense is going to be a fun one. And it's not, even if they don't get to the 7-win mark that I predicted, I do think that watching offense that's not just 60, 70% run plays, it's going to be a lot more fun to watch regardless.
How about you, Alec?
I think in some of these games, it's going to be interesting to see how fans react to a lot of the in some of the offensively challenged years. A lot of the talk was, I would rather watch a team lose 35-31 than 13-10. I guess we'll see if that's tested in some of these shootout games. But yeah, a lot of what, similar to a lot of what Richie said, I think there's going to be a lot of different looks on offense. I'm looking forward to, like I mentioned in the last episode, what kind of different, personnel or kind of different concepts they try to throw out there. The defense is going to be a work in progress throughout the entire year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that unit progresses as a whole, particularly the two, like we talked about, the two transfer defensive ends, the transfer defensive backs, just how that unit kind of gels as the season goes on, especially in the back half of the season when you have all those tough opponents. And I guess I'll close it with this. When you're going into those last two games of the season against Ohio State and Penn State, I don't think there's going to be anyone that is more of a Rutgers hater in those two games than the Pinstripe Bowl executives. They are just begging for Rutgers to lose those two games and finish either 6-6 or 7-5. They just want those ticket sales for Rutgers fans at Yankee Stadium so bad. They're going to be rooting against Rutgers. But this is going to be an interesting year. I think this is a year of transition as Rutgers is kind of forging themselves into the newer age of college football, emphasizing more in the transfer portal. That's something that we kind of criticized them for last year, where it felt like they could have done more in the portal. Leaning more into an offensive style, up-tempo, more of a passing attack, things like that, while still keeping a lot of the core principles that Greg Schiano has instilled in the program. So it's going to be a very interesting year, whether they go 0-12 or 12-0 or somewhere in between. It's going to be very fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I guess, I just think this program is healthy, and I really hope that their record reflects that, because there's a lot of weird things that can happen in the schedule. Like we all predicted a win against Maryland, but I think, let's say something happens the 8th and in the week before. If you have a week to prepare with AJ Serace, like I still think they will win that game. But if something happens mid-game, something bizarre, there's so many things that can happen. That being said, again, like they could just as easily win against Iowa, I have them losing, but they could just as easily win against Minnesota, win against Iowa. I don't really think they'll win against Washington, but I wouldn't be insanely surprised if they did. But it's not the right thing to probably pick that's for sure going to happen. And so there's just so many things that should make the season exciting, like Alec was saying. And I just hope that the coaching staff has a quicker, because they're never going to be such a quick trigger that they're going to like have the leash too short for anything other than Shiano's past history at quarterback. So even if they like are a little bit more aggressive than they think they even need to be in changing things up, I still think that that's still conservative enough for this team. So I'm looking forward to it. I can't believe we're finally here after a long offseason that also featured a pathetic showing by the basketball team to hopefully finally get us back to, let's just right this ship. Kelly's in era, undefeated. Let's keep this thing going.
Adding on to David's point, I think, it really is pivotal for the long-term health of the program that they do not take a step back this season. I think 6-6 and 7-5 is fine. To Alec's point, it's a transition year. You have a lot of new personnel. You've made a lot of changes. You're replacing some key players. Even though the offense has a very high ceiling, you are replacing a lot of players, key impact players from last year. So I think going 6-6 and 7-5 would be, to David's point, keeping this program healthy. In this day and age with, the transfer portal, recruiting, you can't afford to take a step back and knock off that momentum that Rutgers has built up over the last couple of years. So anything less than 6-6, I think, would be damaging in that regard. There could be a lot of weird things that happen, and hopefully they could persevere. We've seen this team when their backs have been against a wall, when kind of they've had a lot of adversity, they have been able to rise to the challenge and be able to get to a bowl game. And I think that's what we'll see again this year. But I think also talking about Kelly Zinn, she needs this team to make a bowl game. She needs this team to keep things moving forward, to build momentum for her. She's talking about corporate sponsorship. I think obviously it makes a ton of sense. I honestly am a little skeptical there because I think it's just a heavy lift to change perceptions from that perspective. But she's going to need this team to succeed to have a chance to really build in that area. So this is a huge season for many reasons. I'm very excited about it. I'm, I think reasonably optimistic. To other people's points, I mean, there's a lot of winnable games in there. I think 8 or 9 is certainly on the table. But I think if things balance out, that's where I see it 6-6. But I still think that would be enough to keep things moving forward to the future.
I'm almost surprised that looking at my predictions at 7-5, given what we thought about the schedule, all the way from the beginning of last year, talking about how tough this schedule was going to be, and it is tough. But I just have a lot of faith in the offense, and at the end of the day, I do think Rutgers is a mid-tier Big Ten team at this juncture. And if you're going to be a mid-tier team, you've got to get 2 bowl games, even if you eke out some wins. I do think if we had capitalized last year and done what I thought we could have done, taking a step back this year wouldn't have been as bad. But given the fact that we didn't, you do have to stay at 6-6, 7-5 to maintain the perception and the health of the program. A lot can happen in these games. I made my predictions, but that Big Ten schedule has a lot of variables outside of a few. And so it could go either way. And we could have some surprises. We could have positive or negative surprises. It's going to be a wild ride. I'm just hoping for another fun season where we wind up getting a bowl game and, we have an enjoyable couple trips to Piscataway and some games to watch on TV that aren't blowouts.
Guys, I couldn't have said it better myself. A lot of really great anecdotes, really great points made in the closing. I want to thank everybody who's listened. Can't wait for tonight. Kickoff at 6 p.m. against the Ohio Bobcats. If you're listening to this on Thursday, the 28th. Exciting season. Can't wait to see just a slightly different variation of Rutgers football with an offensively led team versus a defensively led team. But make sure everybody follows the Night Report podcast. Make sure they follow the Scarlet Faithful podcast. Make sure they follow Night Watch podcast on both YouTube and your favorite podcasting app. Anybody else got anything they want to plug before we head out of here today? I think anyone who's listening probably knows everybody on the screen pretty intimately at this point. But we want to thank you all for listening, and hopefully this season is as good as we all kind of are expecting it to be. But for me and the rest of the guys, this has been another preview in the books. Let's get to it. I can't wait.